Honorable Obiamwa, I mean, it's just very simple. Enforce the bylaws that you already have. So, for instance, clear all the people who have come out in the streets.
Well, thank you, but it's not as simple as that. You clear them, they go into the markets. They are still supposed to observe the protocols. It's not just pushing them back into the market, and then when they get to the market, you don't think about social distancing, or you don't say that you should have your masks in place or obey the other protocols. It's true that we need to enforce that aspect where people are not authorized to trade and they are trading. We should ensure that they don't do it. But you're supposed to find spaces for them. She's saying that there's enough space in the markets. That really is not the issue. The main issue is the spacing. Space means that you can still have a place to go and do your business. But how close are you to the next person? That is where we are talking about alternative markets. And she mentioned it. That's happened before, that they had to use other places when they were building the Makola shopping mall. It's for us to all understand what we are in and for us to appreciate that this is for our own safety. Sometimes you hear them complaining as if we are being targeted or we are being too rigid on them, or it will end up affecting their business. But that's why I'm saying that we need to still continue educating and creating the awareness. But beyond a certain point, we would have to bring in the enforcement and the laws to ensure that we are all safe. We cannot continue talking about this forever without insisting that, no, you can't do it this way. We've talked about it enough. We've engaged your leaders have engaged you, and you are bold enough to even speak to the camera and say that I couldn't be bothered. That cannot go on. Because if you say that nobody should play football at a stadium, and we are complying with it, nobody should go to the stadium to go and watch a match, because if there are no matches, we are complying. Nobody should go to church, we are complying. Private funerals and burials, not more than 25, as much as possible, we are complying. So if you're selling food and you think, in your case, the rules should be relaxed because you are selling food, then you are the one endangering all of us. And it cannot go on forever.
So should we, because yesterday I engaged the acting dean of the local government studies who said, you know, clearly there are people who know what the right things are, but they insist on doing the wrong things. We need to be punishing. I mean, we've seen, for instance, those who breached the lockdown rules, taken to court and fined. And if you can't pay, you go to jail.
Yes, sanctioning people, including preventing you from coming back to the place where you're doing business. So, yes, because if you don't allow you to come there to come and do business, then you know the implications of not complying with what you're supposed to.
But so what's the ministry's role? Because the assembly is there, so we can't just jump straight to the ministry.
So the ministry's role is to direct the assemblies, to monitor what they are doing, supervise them, and ensure that they implement what the law requires and what the law has mandated them to do. Ours is to direct and monitor and supervise them, and then engage them and bring in new aspects if we think this is the way to go.
Okay.
So they report to us every day. There's a platform, there's a monitoring team every day across the country. Even those who were not under lockdown, they were reporting to us every day, because the protocols and everything were not for only the 47 assemblies which were locked down. All the 260. So if Techima is not part of lockdown, we are still monitoring what's happening in Techima. How are you ensuring that the protocols?
So is that task too big for them? Is this something they can do? Because I listened to the MC who oversees the Kaswa market, for instance, yesterday on the Kusi saying, and I'm sure we're both listening to the same program. The description of what was happening there yesterday, particularly even as it was a market day, it looked too big for the assembly alone to handle.
They looked or they sounded overwhelmed. Overwhelmed in the sense that they deal with influx of people, even from outside their district. And once it's market day or a hectic day, they think that probably even the place is too small for such activity. And then in controlling and managing it, it becomes more difficult. Such peculiar situations, we need to sit back and look at it. Do you then say that you stop market days? Do you say that you stop people from moving into the market on particular days so that the place doesn't become so overcrowded that it becomes dangerous for everybody? All those things we've discussed and discussed them. When they were under lockdown, they seemed to be able to manage it. Before lockdown, we had even put in place arrangements and protocols, but as of yesterday, he sounded quite overwhelmed, and it's a typical place that we need to look at. If you go to Techiman, they seem to have very peculiar problems, and we are addressing them.
Malamata and the visuals, I think this is Malamata. Malamata is relatively calm. I mean, it's not crowded, especially if they all decide to, and I think largely they are all within the market itself, so it make it really easier, even if you're visiting and you're going to buy foodstuffs. I don't know if there's a certain model that all the markets can emulate. Is there a standard?
Of course, there is a standard. The ideal standard is to have a modern market where people stay in their shops and their stores, and it's easy to manage them. The next step is where they are in open places. The major thing is about safety and decongesting. Because of the situation, we have to decongest. And decongesting means that you move to other places so that people come into the market to know that the yam sellers are now here. So I need to go there instead of coming straight here. And if you move all yam sellers to a particular place, and there's enough space for them to do their business, then you'll be addressing the situation. And that's why I'm saying that for some places, they have enough space to be able to engage in this. They have alternative markets lined up. The rest is to insist that move to that market, because that's where you have to do business, and that's where we have our safety.
Okay, so are there I asked about timelines. We see that you're engaging with your men on the ground, your men and women on the ground. But in times like these, we know, yes, the notice just came on Sunday nights.
No,
but this is Wednesday.
As I said before, then they were doing it. If I show you the reports, it's not only after they left.
But it looks like we've retrogressed in some instances.
Simply because for 3 weeks we were under a certain restriction, and then when the restriction has been lifted, others have the impression that some will even say that, oh, probably after a week or two, the restrictions will be imposed again. So they go back, like yesterday, the day before the lockdown. You saw the situation in Accra. It was so chaotic, and those who even wanted to move out of Accra, they were so much in a hurry so everything appeared a bit chaotic. Since the lifting, there appears to be some places where people are still moving and rushing. You're trying to calm things down. People should stay calm. I'm sure that within a few days, all these things will also be addressed. There will still be pockets of areas where we have challenges. The peculiar areas of challenge, we should be able to move in and address as we go on. If you listen to a lot of the MMDCs, they are doing very well. They are on top of their job.
I think Tema is commendable. You talked about that, because I had the MCA as well. He seemed to have things under control there. Just finally, one thing that I thought I should bounce off you. I read this article by Benjamin Chum on effects of COVID-19 on MMDA's IGF, and that's published on adumonline.com. So he talks about a major reduction in the IGFs leading to huge financial burden on the assemblies. Is that something that has been talked about at your level?
Certainly, it's not only about the assemblies, it's all businesses. And for the assemblies, the peculiar situation is they have to collect fees and rates from those who do business to be able to also generate some revenue. So if you close all bars and restaurants, obviously that affects revenue. The areas where they can make money, if those areas are not operating or they've gone very down, it creates problems for them. Even burial permits, etc., bring in money, and where people are not burying, a lot of people are still keeping their loved ones in the mortuaries. They affect them. And when it happens that way, they have employees who are paid through IGF. If they are not making that money, then they may have to also reduce the number of people that they have employed. So obviously the assemblies have challenges. For us, even we have what we call the District Development Fund, DDF, where we sit down with the donors bring in some money, government provides counterpart funding. For now, they have projects that they are supposed to carry out with the DDF. We've agreed that a certain percentage should be used for COVID-19 projects, so that at least it also helps in mitigating some of these things. But at the end of the day, once revenue is low, it also affects what they are able to do in the assemblies and even employment and other things.
Well, this is hard for all of us, also very hard for the assemblies, because now we're not looking at the national strategy. Look at us talking about the assemblies. We're zeroing it down to the ground, and they don't have as much as well. Their means of generating funds, not all the market. So in some of the market, we see they're crowded, but in other places, not all the market women and men are even going to the market. So collecting the revenues that they also take in the market, that will also be a problem. And then, of course, we know some of their planned programs have also been cancelled. So the effect is being felt everywhere. But hopefully we'll be able to manage the situation. Honorable Obiamwa, I thank you for coming into the studio.
Thank you
but
so
your
much.
Constituency, because, you know, just adjourning, cases have been recorded in terms of COVID-19. Ekrapem South, everything is okay?
When you said my constituency, the reality is that we've had reports of suspected cases. Let's say Ekrapem South. But so far, those suspected cases have tended to be negative. And then there were those two who were supposed to be traced, either coming from abroad or having contacts. Those traces were done and they've turned negative. But it doesn't mean that it can be negative forever. Because for the adjoining constituency, Ekrapem North, 2 have turned positive. And we even understand for Insonadweji, 1 person has proven positive. So we need to observe all these things, but you cannot guarantee that you may not end up with a few of these cases turning positive. But the most critical thing is the education, is the awareness and the prevention and all the things that we can do to stay safe, stay at home, stay calm, and then work so hard that at least the devastation around the world, ours will be minimized. But it all depends on us. All depends on us. If sometimes you see, especially the young ones, you see that for when you are young, they say the immortality of youth. When you are young, you think death is nowhere near you. So some are not too meticulous and compliant with what we are supposed to do. And it's even come out that for the males, they are more recalcitrant than the females. Females are more compliant. You wash your hands, protect yourself, do this. But for the guys, they still think that they are nowhere near death. And they sometimes take risks that then come to affect all of us. And one thing that I think has saved us is the closing down of the educational institutions. I mean, whatever it is, I think it was a major decision, a master stroke that has really saved us.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Honorable, thank you very much for coming into the studio and you know, taking time off and answering the questions as well. Stay with us. We have lots of conversation. There's the minister's press briefing this morning as well. 2 things they've tabled. One is updates in case counts and management, and also Ghana's testing capacity explained. That's all coming up later this morning. We'll bring you all these conversations. So stay right here with us. Roland Walker comes up next.